Was it John that fixed my bullet issue?
Yes. And I said, stop.
What magic did you use to do that?
Don't you know, haven't you learned by now that when dealing with rich text editing applications where you have a kind of a what you see is what you get output, that even though this is not probably technically the case, although it used to be in some things, you can conceptualize it as there being invisible formatting characters, zero width invisible formatting characters attached to text that you can't delete. And that when things touch them, they infect the thing that they touch. So all formatting in rich text editors like Word or any of these types of things involves manipulating what you can conceptualize as invisible zero width formatting characters. What was the one that actually had them? Was it WordStar? One of the old text editors, one of the old word processors, a really old one, actually had invisible formatting characters, and you could make them visible. Those were the days.
You can do that in Word, I believe. And I thought ClarisWorks would do that.
I don't know if any of them still have it, but the old days word processors actually were done that way. These days, it's on behind the scenes. I have no idea how it works. I'm sure it's much more complicated than simple invisible formatting characters. But anyway, yeah, you just have to learn how to bump the conceptual invisible formatting characters up against each other to infect their neighbors, get their infection, and move it down. It just
that was the problem. Is I was trying to indent just the Reddit related follow up, and I was unfortunately indenting all of the rest of the topics, and I couldn't figure out how to uninfect them. I am not as good a doctor as you are.
I know. I saw that. And you just gotta find a part that looks the way you want and use it to spread its correct lookingness to its neighbors. And it's,
So this is like an outbreak. I need to find the monkey, and then that'll solve all my problems.
Word sometimes would defeat me. Sometimes in Word I could not figure out how to manipulate the invisible forces that control the formatting, and it's just like delete everything, start a new document, and try again.
Right?
Because like even if you delete all the content and you try to like paste it back in or type it in again, it would still obey the.
Oh yeah,
it's like homeopathy where like the document still has the
essence,
sense memory or whatever of the content that was there before.
Diluted 1,000,000 times, it still has the essence of the old formatting.
Right. You delete all the text, but when you put the text back, the document remembers the text that used to be there.
Do you want timestamps to make your chapter markers easier?
No, the timestamps move when I edit, so it doesn't matter. Adding the chapter markers is only taking like 5 minutes.
Can I just point out that I think if we've received, let's say, 20 pieces of feedback with regard to the chapter markers, easily 18 of which have somehow traced back to Germany.
Oh, at least. I bet the other 2 that weren't from Germany were people who were actually Germans, just were living somewhere else temporarily, Maybe a German heritage. I don't know.
It's so funny. I don't know what it is with the Germans and their chapter markers, but God, do they ever love them.
They really do. It's funny because no one else really seems to care. Or even notice.
Nope.
But the Germans love them.
Well, they're all using a popular podcast client that doesn't support chapter markers.
I wonder what clients do support chapter markers? You would know.
I think I'm the only one who doesn't, actually. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I know the Apple one does to a limited degree. I mean, it's easy because there's actually an API in AV Player to just fetch chapters, and it supports almost every format that's out there in at least a basic way. And I actually tried it briefly, and it had an issue where it would just write all over random memory garbage with certain files that had embedded artwork in their chapters.
Ooh, cool.
So it would just destroy the memory and corrupt everything, and eventually the app would crash when you loaded like this one particular file. And it's not well written enough for me to want to use. So I don't know.
You know what you should do is whenever you're up for a new lease, you should spend, the time leading up to then building chapter support. So when you return to Munich to do European delivery, you will be welcomed there like a god.
You think that would work?
I think so, because if there's anything that Germans love in the entire world other than order, it is chapters.
Yeah, I really do like the Germans, though.
Actually, I do too. As much as I'm poking fun, I really do as well.
I feel like these are like my people. Like they're nerds who drive well and are on time to things, and that's just amazing.
No, again, as much as I'm poking fun, I couldn't possibly agree with you more. And as Eschatologist says in the chat, chapters are a form of order. So that's a fair point.
Well, I've never used chapters myself, like as a podcast listener, and maybe that's because I spent the last 2 to 2.5 years or whatever it's been using my own app, which doesn't support them. But I've just never been compelled to, and there's also a major supply issue where very few podcasts use chapter marks, and I don't know, what are people using to put them in? I know there's a web service called Auphonic that does a lot of podcast post-processing stuff, and they offer it. But that's like a paid monthly kind of service, and I know Jason Snell uses that for Clockwise. But beyond that, like there used to be an Apple tool, I think, in GarageBand or something, but they discontinued it years ago. So I don't know. Like I think there's two problems here. There's a tools problem and a client problem, and that combines to form at least part of the demand problem. So I don't know. We'll see.
So what magic are you using?
I'm solving the tools problem first, and we're going to move on.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we should probably do some follow-up. John, why don't you tell us about what Satya Nadella has said about your hatred of Apple?
That's not what he's talking about. Anyway, this is a interview from a while ago where Satya Nadella is talking to Mary Jo Foley at ZDNet in a long interview. And I think we pulled a snippet from this interview before, which is why I had read it. But I pulled out this other snippet that I thought was interesting. This is Satya Nadella talking. He says, "You've got to remember, even the Apple regeneration started with colorful iMacs. So let us first get the colorful iMacs. I think with what we're doing with Lumia, we're at that stage. I want to do good devices that people like, and then we will go on to doing the next thing and the next thing." I thought this was really interesting to see the CEO of Microsoft basically like intentionally pull Microsoft down to Apple's level to say we are where Apple was before their resurgence. We are at such an incredible low point that we're at the stage where we're going to make some colorful iMacs. We're not at the stage where we're making the iPod. We're not at the stage where we're making the iPhone or the iPad. We're at the stage where we're making the colorful iMacs, which I think is sandbagging in the highest degree, because Microsoft is nowhere near the low point that Apple was when Steve Jobs came back or when they were introducing the iMacs. Nowhere near that low, like financially, like the quality and number of products they have and that they sell, and just like in every other respect. But this is how the CEO of Microsoft is positioning his company to say, we want you to lower your expectations of us, I guess. Like, think of us like where Apple was. Like, give us a chance. Maybe we're not blowing you away, but we just want to make something cool that kind of catches the imagination, is kind of popular. And that's what we think we're doing with these new Lumia phones. And I know they're not the next iPhone, but, come on, give us a break. It took Apple a while, too. Really interesting strategy. Something that I think also that someone from the old Microsoft, like Gates or Ballmer, could not pull off, just because since they were the people in charge when Microsoft was king of the world, it would sound weird for them to say Microsoft is basically where Apple was in 1998. But, because it would just, I don't know if those words could even come out of their mouth, or if they could put themselves into that position, but a new CEO can say that. And I thought it was an interesting strategy for how they're trying to position their company to the outside world.
Yeah, it's an odd analogy, but I mean, it sort of makes sense. Why don't you tell us about the trim saga that will never end?
Yeah, I think we talked about the popular Samsung SSDs, and people were filing bugs against them, and then Samsung was like, that's not our problem because you're using it in Linux, and Linux isn't a supported platform, and then people got angry, and then we didn't know whether there were problems with these popular SSDs or not. The latest development in that saga is that Samsung says it's not a problem with our firmware or our drives, it's a problem with the Linux kernel, and here's a patch to help fix it. I don't know what the actual problem is. Maybe their patch to the kernel works around a problem in Samsung's SSDs. There's another link that's eternally being put off in the show notes where some MacNN article is trying to test these popular SSDs in OS X and see if they can create a corruption. And I don't know how rigorous their testing is, but I would say this whole thing is still a question mark to me, because just because Samsung says it's a bug in a Linux kernel and provides a patch to work around it, was it a Linux kernel bug? Like I said, is their patch just working around a bug in the firmware? And is any of this relevant at all to people running OS X? I don't know. So still, I'm just hanging back and not bothering with the trim stuff and keeping my fingers crossed.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off for him. That's a reference, by the way. Marco, tell us about your cellular option dilemma.
Yeah, so in last week's episode, I talked about how I was having an issue with deciding Overcast's cellular download preferences because I'm adding streaming for the next big version, and there was a question of should streaming have its own preference, and I already had these two other preferences, and how do I combine these possibly three preferences in any way that makes sense and is understandable by users and doesn't have too much clutter in the options and complexity and everything. And I explained that part of the reason why. So right now I have, in the current version, there's two options. One of them is download over cellular, which makes sense. The other one is basically like try to do anything over cellular. And the reason why I couldn't just rely on the system toggle for that was because of what I considered a bug in the system reachability framework, which is that if a user had disabled cell access completely for the app in iOS settings, which you can do per app, the system would still tell the app that it was connected to the internet via cellular, and so the app would have no way to tell that it wasn't allowed to use this connection. So if it tried to use the connection, it would show the annoying box to the user saying cellular's data is disabled for this app. You can change that in settings. And my feeling was it should be the way it used to be, which is that if somebody disabled cell access for you in iOS 7, the system would report to your app that it was just offline when it was on cellular. So then you could just avoid doing things and not show that stupid alert to people. Turns out, in iOS 8.4, that bug is still there, but in iOS 9, it's fixed. So in iOS 9, I did some testing over the last couple of days. In iOS 9, if you, as the app, use the reachability framework to test the connection, if the user's on cellular and you aren't allowed to use it, it properly reports it as offline, which is the way it used to be and the way it should have always been. So this lets me remove that second setting I have now, which is it's called sync over cellular. It lets me remove that setting completely, which is great. So now I only will have the download over cellular option in the downloader area, and I don't need a streaming option at all, because streaming can just rely on the system setting. If you don't want Overcast to use cell data, just disable it in system settings, and that's it. So I've gone from 2 settings in the current version to potentially needing 3 in the next version, but instead going down to 1, which is fantastic.
Why don't you need the settings anymore? Are you saying the next version is not going to run on iOS 8?
I'm saying I will no longer care about a minor annoyance detail that will affect very, very few people. It's not worth keep it. Like, so, for instance, the current version of the app also has a setting in nitpicky details called seek acceleration. This is a setting I've actually had since 1.0. When you seek in Overcast, if you hit seek back or forward by the 30 seconds or whatever, if you hit that a bunch of times in a row, so that you're doing more than 1 per second, basically. I forget exactly what my threshold is, but if you do more than one of those per second, after a few, I start increasing the interval that they're seeking by. So it lets you, if you're in a situation where you only have access to seek back and forward features, like if you're in a car and it has the button integration, or if you have headphones with those buttons on them, or a remote with those buttons on it, if you want to seek a long distance in a track, it lets you get there a lot faster. So if you seek a whole bunch of times in a row, it'll go 30, 30, 30, 45, 50, 60, 90, it'll accelerate up to a certain ceiling. And I've always had an option to disable that since 1.0. And that option syncs to the server, because that syncs to your account. So I can actually tell how many people use it. And I've been watching, and I brought up on Twitter a few months back, hey, can I just remove this option? And I learned that most of the respondents didn't really understand what it did. Whether they said, yes, remove it, or no, keep it, most of them seemed like they were misunderstanding what it did. And so I decided that doesn't need to be an option anymore. And I looked at the server, and usage of it was under 1% of people who changed the default, which is on. So in 2.0, that option is just gone. I'm not going to keep a setting around in what is a very small setting screen that's used by fewer than 1% of the users. That's not worth the complexity. So back to the cellular thing, people who are going to disable cellular in the system preferences completely for the app. I can't measure that right now. I'm guessing it's probably not below 1%, but I bet it's pretty low. So people who are going to disable that, and also who are going to be running iOS 8 for longer than the next couple of months, it's not worth it. It's not worth keeping that setting around just to have them be able to avoid seeing the cell data disabled dialog box as often as they could. It's such a small gain for so few people for such a short time that it's just not worth it. Also, I'm not taking the move to iOS 9 as something that needs to be very carefully and slowly done. As soon as iOS 9 is out, I'm probably going to release an update that requires it, or at least soon afterwards, depending on what compelling reasons I have. Because the fact is, iOS 9 runs on every device that iOS 8 runs on. Jailbreakers haven't jailbroken it yet, I don't think, but I don't care. I honestly do not care at all what jailbreakers can run. I don't follow that. I don't need to follow that. I think if you jailbreak, that's up to you to follow, and I can't waste my time on that because jailbreaking is just a nightmare of support complexity, and it's just not worth it. So regardless, I don't care about jailbreakability, and and people who hold on to old versions forever because they just don't like the new version, I don't really cater to them either. I feel like if your device can run iOS whatever, I don't feel bad requiring iOS whatever. Even if you choose not to install iOS whatever, if you choose to keep the old version around, I consider that okay, well, part of your cost of doing that is you're going to lose future updates to apps that require all this stuff. So anyway, that's how I feel about that. What was the question? I forgot.
I was basically asking you if you were going to make Overcast iOS 9 only, and you eventually worked up to it.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm building 2.0 against iOS 8 because I would like to release it before iOS 9 is released. I don't know if I will. I don't know if I'll be able to. I mean, I'm trying. I would like to release it as soon as I can.
Just to be clear, the last time you said you want to release soon, you ended up a year late? Is that correct?
Something like that, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, no, actually what is motivating me to want to release this soon is actually the playlist reordering bug. Because it's too complicated to backport the fix to that into the 1.0 branch. And so I would like to, I'm actually planning on now cutting a few features from 2.0's initial launch just so I can get it out faster, and then adding back those features later in 2.1 or whatever. Our first sponsor this week is Need. Need is a curated retailer and publication for men, and the people behind Need recently launched Foremost, a purveyor of small batch American-made clothing for men and women. So this is great. Need is run by our friend Matt Alexander. He's a really, really super nice guy. He was, in case you guys don't know, not only is he on the Bonanza podcast, but he was the British voice in our ATP shirt parody promo. So I want to thank him, first of all, for coming in last minute with this, because we had somebody drop out, and he was awesome and picked it up. So thank you, Matt Alexander. Anyway, Need is, as I said, a curated retailer and publication, and they sell men's clothing, but they also sell literature, furniture, coffee, and more for discerning shoppers. So each month they curate and sell, and sometimes even design, a limited selection of these products. So rather than offering an overwhelming selection of everything under the sun all at once, Need only sells 10 to 15 products exclusively each month, whilst, he's British, so he says whilst, so I will say whilst, whilst also offering an ongoing array of essentials. So they have the monthly editions, and they have essentials, which are always available. So Need just launched its latest collection, Volume 2.8, featuring items as diverse as responsibly made furniture, bicycles, clothing, sunglasses, and literature. There's no subscriptions, there's no services, there's no boxes or stylists or other gimmicks. Instead, Need simply sends you an email or two each month. You come along to see what's new, you buy some things if you want them, and then you move on with your life. Very simple, no gimmicks, no subscriptions, nothing like that. Now, for ATP listeners, Need is offering 25% off anything on the site with the code PREFOLLOWUP. And this is 25% off. This is actually, not only is this more than their normal discounts, this is the biggest discount they've ever offered. I verified that with them. Biggest discount they've ever offered, 25% off anything you buy with code PREFOLLOWUP. Now, Foremost is their new site. Foremost is it's a small batch American-made clothing line for men and women. So this is high-quality American-made stuff, men and women. And as an added bonus, the code PREFOLLOWUP will also apply to anything you buy from Foremost. So Foremost has released 4 men's and women's collections to date. Their latest round has received enormous praise for its quality and affordability. Now, even TechCrunch is the bastion of modern fashion. TechCrunch wrote, Foremost offers J.Crew quality at H&M pricing. Now, I don't know what any of those words mean, but Matt promised me that's a good thing. Yeah, do you know what those are?
Yes.
J.Crew quality at H&M pricing?
Yes.
That's a good thing?
It's a good thing.
All right. Check out Need and Foremost for men and women by visiting neededition.com and foremostedition.com. You can even say hello and harass them in the live chat widget on the site, which is always powered by one of Need's employees or Matt himself, never outsourced to anybody crazy or bots. So anyway, thank you very much to Matt Alexander and Need Edition and ForemostEdition.com. Use code PREFOLLOWUP at checkout to save 25% off anything in the store, the biggest discount they've ever offered. And personally, as I said, Matt's a really nice guy. He came in at the last minute, saved our butts, so support him. And he recently got engaged, and he's super nice, and he supports us. So I would like to challenge the listeners. This is not in the script. I'd like to challenge the listeners. Let's try to sell them out completely. Like, I want to deplete all of their stock of everything. And Foremost might be tough. Need we can probably do. Let's do it. Let's deplete their entire stock of everything, really. Go to neededition.com and foremostedition.com. Use code PREFOLLOWUP for 25% off. Thanks a lot to Need and Foremost for sponsoring our show.
All right. So we had a discussion about Reddit last episode, and we got some feedback about that.
We got nothing wrong.
We got nothing wrong. Not a thing. We got some feedback about that. We got less than I expected, which I was kind of happy about. And it was less vile than I expected, which I was super happy about. But we've got some new thoughts or some things to address, perhaps. John, would you like to tell us about some of the things that you've learned, discovered, or thought about since then?
Back when this was in the follow-up section, seems so long ago. This topic, I mean, I thought of like removing a lot of it because I just listened to last week's episode, and I was like, yeah, I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to say on the topic. And the reason because I had all this follow-up, when feedback comes in, I add corrections to the follow-up, go through, the normal pattern of stuff. But then I listened to the episode, I'm like, but in that episode, I had so many disclaimers. Like at the end of the thing, I was like, I know I got most of the details wrong, but it's not the details that I'm talking about. I'm trying to just address the big picture, blah, blah, blah. People don't care. They still want to correct you on the details, which is fine. So in the end, I left it in, especially once Casey moved it down to be a topic. But there are a couple just straight up factual things that I didn't later say that I knew I got wrong. One of them was that Reddit is owned by Condé Nast, and that is no longer the case. We'll link to a little fact about it there where they were owned by Condé Nast, and then they were owned by Condé Nast's parent company, but then they were spun out and reincorporated independently. And so, according to this thing, the best characterization might be to say that Reddit is a part sibling once removed of Condé Nast. So,
well, that totally clears things up.
That was something I did not know I got wrong, because most of the other details I was just like winging it and giving examples, and every time I gave an example, I was like, I know that's probably not accurate or true, but I mean, it makes it seem like I didn't read a lot about this. When I did, I just didn't write down or memorize the individual facts. It was why I was trying to go big picture. And that brings me to the next topic, which is the few mildly negative bits of feedback we got seemed to me to be treating all three of us as if we had never heard of Reddit. Like, what is this crazy Reddit thing? Have you heard about this? And I don't know about you two guys who are younger than I am, but like, if I gave the impression that, like we all said, we're not Reddit regulars. We don't go to the site. We are not part of the community. We don't consider ourselves Redditors or whatever, but it's not as if Reddit is this new thing that we just learned about when this controversy came. So I went and looked up my info, at least. Reddit was founded on June 23rd, 2005, according to Wikipedia, which is never wrong. My account at Reddit was created on August 8th, 2005, which is 46 days after it was founded. So I'm sorry that I did not get in on the ground floor of Reddit. The site was around for a whole 46 days before I joined and was a member for the next 10 years. Like, again, I'm not a regular member of Reddit, right? I do not go there frequently, but I think the most angry characterization as us being entirely out of touch with Reddit or just having discovered Reddit due to the Ellen Pao controversy is wildly inaccurate.
Yeah, and I think part of what we were trying to describe is expressly what an outsider thinks of the situation. And I agree with you, John, that I don't think any of us painted us as experts on what the intricacies of how Reddit works internally, either for users or moderators or employees. But I know that we were all speaking more of, hey, from an outsider, kind of third party that's not really invested in this, looking in, it looks kind of gross. And I stand by that.
Yeah, like that's the perspective we were giving as casuals, like not as people who are confused by what this whole crazy Reddit thing is, but it's just like there's a community, it exists, and we're not really that involved in it. We know about it, we dip in and out of it, we see it, right? But and I think that's most people. Like, most people are not hardcore Reddit users. Reddit has tremendous traffic. Only a small portion of that tremendous traffic are the sort of very dedicated people who are very invested in Reddit as a community. That's the nature of any high traffic site. You don't have millions and millions of people, all of whom are super invested in you. That's just numbers, right? So our perspective as sort of outsiders who I think understand the phenomenon of Reddit and sites like Reddit and the dynamics of online communities, but are not so invested in it that sort of any discussion of any negative aspect of Reddit is seen as a condemnation of all members of Reddit. Like, that's not where we were coming from at all. But we were giving an outside perspective. And I think I certainly was not particularly interested in the specific details of whatever the controversy of the day is about he said and she said this, and these people are harassing this person, and these are the internal politics there. Just trying to say, like, is Reddit a place that we feel like we would like to hang out, and if not, why not?
Yeah, I agree with you. The only somewhat decent feedback, well, that's not fair. The feedback that struck me most that we got was someone who said, in so many words, you were complaining and moaning about Reddit and how gross Reddit is, but a lot of gross stuff happens on Twitter, and none of the three of us really complained and moaned about Twitter last episode. And I that really made me think for a minute, and I don't have any good answers. Maybe because I'm pretty invested in Twitter, and I'm invested in what I like to think of as the good corner of Twitter. I don't see a lot of the just absolutely vile, terrible, disgusting things that happen on Twitter, because they happen. They definitely happen. But I don't get exposed to it, yet I feel like I hear a lot more often about the terrible, vile, and disgusting things that happen on Reddit. And I was curious, John or Marco, if you guys had any thoughts about why Twitter is okay, but Reddit isn't.
Oh, they're both disasters. We just know how to... I think it's... You can look at both of those and say, wow, both of these are absolutely horrible at dealing with abusive people. That's just the way it is. In fact, Twitter might even be worse. I don't know. I don't know enough about Reddit to say. Twitter's really bad about it. I know that.
Well, we did talk about it last show, and I mentioned this was the objection that I said, like, I was feeling some trepidation about going to Reddit because I felt like I was kind of tacitly supporting an organization that provides a home for communities that make me uncomfortable, that I don't like, right? And I didn't feel that with Twitter. And I think for me, the difference is, and I'd mentioned, like, well, because, I don't see any ads on Twitter, so what am I really doing that's supporting them? But, this feedback from Don is right that, like, by my participation in Twitter, I'm still supporting them, whether I see ads or not, right? And I think the reason I feel differently about it is not so much with my investment in Twitter, but that for as bad as Twitter is about dealing with harassment, they have policies in place that if you were to look at the policies, you would say, these are good, and they show that Twitter doesn't want this thing to happen. They're really bad at implementing those policies. Many times their implementation, again, like, it's like, oh, we have a way for you to report people for harassment. We'll do something about it. And like the form would require revealing your personal information to the person you're harassing. And they would, their decision-making process would not be great on it. But like the fact that the Twitter CEO comes out and said, we are really bad at this and we need to get better. And that they have taken positive steps to make their company better at dealing with this shows that this is the direction they want to go in. It's not as if the CEO of Twitter is saying, we're really bad at it and that's by design because we don't want to clamp down too much. We want to make sure people feel free to say whatever they want to say. That's not the message coming out of Twitter at all. Execution-wise, still bad. But everything they have done and everything they have said and done is saying it's aspirational. They're saying, we want to be over there. We want people to feel more welcome on Twitter. We want to deal with the harassment problem. We want to stop this from happening. And here are the things that we're going to do. And then, they try to do something and people complain or whatever. And the thing that's most upsetting to me about Reddit is the aspirational thing. I don't agree with their aspirations. Reddit says, we want our community to be like this. I'm like, okay, well, I don't like that. I don't like that goal state. I think Twitter's goal state, if you were to talk to the CEO of what do you want Twitter to be like? What are you trying to reach? I would agree more with what they're going for in terms of a place where people feel like they're free from abusive behavior or have the tools to deal with abusive behavior, right? The Twitter wants to provide that, whereas Reddit seems to want to provide a safe haven for people to trade ideas and behave in ways that I don't like, right? And again, this, like, I'm glad no one has brought this up. To the credit of all the people, of all the various Reddit people who have listened to this thing and sent feedback, nobody has brought out the old, the old saw about, like, you're trying to say that Reddit doesn't have a right to exist. Like, I'm so glad that I mean, either that speaks to the small number of Reddit people who listen to our show, or the general intelligence of people who are on Reddit, not to bring out that ridiculous argument of, like, I tried very hard in the last show to frame it as, does this community feel like something that I want to participate in? Why and why not? Everyone's free to make the community they want to make. All I'm talking about is, does this feel like something that I want to join in? And my secondary point, which I think we'll get to in a little bit, was like, does the community that they say they want to make, is it the type of thing that I think would be broadly appealing? Right? And I think that's where you get into, like Marco not allowing KKK podcasts on his hypothetical podcast network. That's the type of decision where you can say, if you did that, most people wouldn't care. Like, that is something that excludes that would be broadly appealing, because it's not a system of government. It's just a private website. And if a private website banned that type of content, everyone would be like, all right, yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, that is a broadly appealing decision. Less broadly appealing, banning vegetarians, right? Then all of a sudden, like, well, now you are really narrowing your audience, because if you decide that's what you want on your site, that's fine. But a lot of people are going to rightly say, now that's getting to be, like the whole idea that there are standards, sort of community standards, like human community standards, whether they're local or state or country or international community standards, that mean if you want something to appeal to the broadest number of people, everyone's okay with you excluding these ideas and this behavior. But once you start getting once you start crossing over into, like, well, that just seems like arbitrary and weird, like not allowing left-handed people, that's, that doesn't seem weird. But not allowing the KKK, yeah, sure, go ahead, ban them. I think that's okay. They were bothersome anyway. I don't like those ideas, right? And that, maybe that bothers a lot of people, especially if you have a sort of logical mindset. I was like, no, you can't. You either have to allow all ideas or allow no ideas. If you can't, how do you describe that? What's different about the KKK and left-handed people? Like, they're just, it's equivalently arbitrary, right? They're just ideas, man. Yeah, and I think that brings down to the Reddit Q&A that someone linked to with the current Reddit CEO Steve Huffman, Spez, on Reddit. It's a nice thing with the Q&A. The best thing about it, of course, is, speaking of Marco's complaints about the giant indented conversations, a nice person emailed this to us. I lost the name because it's somewhere in our email, but the Q&A is like a bunch of questions and then with numbers, and then the answers follow them. So it's like questions 1 through 7, questions 1 through 3, and then down below there are the answers. And the nice person who emailed us did the same thing and put the question, then answer, then question, then answer, instead of a giant list of questions and then a giant list of numbered answers. And you have to keep, like, mapping back and forth in your mind or keep scrolling back up. All right, so this is section 2, question number 2. The question was blah, and now scroll down and read the answer. God, Reddit just really is not... yeah, this is totally aside from the policy issues. It's not a really welcoming site for people who don't like navigating giant walls of indented text. Anyway, a few items from this Q&A, which I think doesn't pin anything down. Like, they're still trying to work out what they're trying to do. But I picked out a few examples that spoke to the thing that I find unappealing about Reddit. So again, this is the CEO answering some questions. Mocking and calling people stupid is not harassment, right? That was an answer to which question? I got to scroll up and find it. In regards to subreddits for mocking another group, what is the policy on them? Blah, blah, blah. So mocking and calling people stupid is not harassment. I assume that it's defined as not harassment because either implicitly or earlier they're saying, well, harassment is something we don't want, and mocking and calling people stupid is not harassment. Turning this position around, what it basically means is if you come to participate on Reddit, it very well may happen that you get mocked and called stupid. Which, fine, like, again, you define the rules of the community, whatever you want, right? But I would compare this to the Ars Technica policy that I talked about in the last show, where Ars Technica's thing is no ad hominem attacks. Have a discussion on the topic at hand, disagree as violently as you want about, whether whether AltiVec or MMX is better, but no mocking people or calling them stupid. Don't attack the person, attack the ideas. That's the Ars Technica comment policy, right? And I don't think Ars Technica is a super high-minded site where everyone has good behavior. It is a pretty rough and tumble crowd there, right? It's also probably male-dominated. It's got all sort of similar pathologies of the Reddit stuff. And yet Ars Technica has this rule that says, don't attack the person, attack the ideas. Reddit, they're saying, mocking and calling people stupid is not harassment. That's something we think is acceptable behavior in all of our communities. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to you. You can't ban someone for doing it just because they call you stupid or mock you. I find that distasteful. I don't think that's beyond the pale where it's going to be like, oh, now your site is not broadly appealing. But I think it does. I mean, like Twitter, if you come onto Twitter and people are going to mock you and call you stupid, you're going to want you're not going to like that. You're going to want to not see their tweets. You want to be able to block them. And if they keep doing it, then it might become harassment. But anyway, they're categorizing it's not harassment if people do that. What if you come onto a Reddit and everybody says that you're stupid, but everyone only says it once? And every time you appear and post anything on Reddit, each individual person on that entire forum mocks you or calls you stupid, but only does it once. That's, I guess, still not harassment. Your experience of Reddit is that anytime you appear, no one addresses anything that you say, but they merely downvote you, call you stupid, and mock you. That's not a particularly healthy or welcoming community where that I would want to participate in. And yet that's the type of thing they're defining. Another item. Filling someone's inbox with PMs, private messages, saying kill yourself is harassment. Calling someone stupid on a public forum is not. Again, now it's like, if you fill their inbox with private messages that only they can see saying kill yourself, that's harassment. But if you just call them stupid in public, that's not.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
These are outlining behaviors. What they're basically saying is if you're just sending people private messages and saying mean things to them, that's harassment. But if you're just saying it in public and you say it once, it's okay. And again, they can figure out what they want the rules to be. This is the things that I read that make me feel like this is not someplace that I would like to hang out, because I'm not interested in watching people call each other names. Even if I'm not involved, I'm not interested in seeing people mock each other and call each other stupid. I'm interested in an exchange of ideas. I don't think any of this makes Reddit broadly unappealing, but the type of communities that can fit within the rules that they're laying down, a lot of those communities are broadly unappealing. And I think, like, if you follow the letter of the law as Reddit appears to be defining things, you can have a community that is just terrible, that all it is a bunch of people reinforcing their own really bad ideas. There was another really good one in here. The number one thing was that harboring unpopular ideologies is not a reason for banning, which sounds great. It's like exactly like, yeah, what? Just because my ideology is unpopular, I shouldn't be banned. I think when people read that on Reddit, what they have in their mind is, if I think Enterprise is the best Star Trek series, I shouldn't be banned. That is definitely an unpopular idea, that Enterprise is the best Star Trek series. And so that's kind of what's in their mind. Yeah, why should I be banned? Because I have just, this is tyranny of the majority. Why should I have to agree with everybody else? It's supposed to be a free and open exchange of ideas. Harboring unpopular ideology is not a reason for banning, right? But ideologies are different than just ideas or statements or opinions. Harboring there's lots of unpopular ideologies that you would say are not reasons for banning. But if your unpopular ideology is that all black people should be slaves, that is a different unpopular ideology than you think there should be a flat tax of 90% on all Americans, right? To those, and from a sort of logical perspective, those are just both unpopular ideologies. Why should one be banned and another not be banned? It's all up to what kind of community you want to make. Especially if you had rules against like attacking the idea and not the person, I think you could have a community in which that person who's really in favor of the 90% flat tax on all Americans could have a reasonable discussion or debate about his or her position. And the person who thinks all black people should be slaves is never going to have a reasonable debate about it. Like, they are different by their nature. And I think anyone can tell that they're different, but the rules, according to the letter of the rules, they are both unpopular ideologies, and neither one is a reason for banning. And that's the type of community that Reddit seems to be trying to create. And, go for it. Like, if that's the one I make, that's what I make. That's what I'm getting at when I read their sort of goal state. What are we trying to make Reddit become? Like, they're still working out the details. I'm not saying they got to have it all figured out now. The site's only 10 years old. Take your time. But that's what's repelling me. And I think, like I said, the rules sort of as they're evolving them now allow for a lot of things that would definitely be beyond what regular people want to get involved in. And I guess the final other item I had on this is a couple people saying the bad stuff on Reddit doesn't affect me. Some people saying the bad stuff on Reddit does affect them, and they're thinking of pulling back. there is something to be said about subreddits that you don't go to not affecting your life on the Reddit with the cat pictures, right? And I think this gets back to like, is all of Reddit, are all the people on Reddit bad? No, obviously not. The vast, vast majority of people who are heavily participating, even like the super heavy users, they just want to look at cat pictures, man. Like, it's all good. Like, and there's great forums there and where they discuss interesting things, like tons of great stuff on Reddit. This is a case of the rules that allow all that great stuff to bloom on Reddit also allow some bad stuff. And you don't want to think about the bad stuff and you don't want to see it. But sometimes those people wander over to your end. And even if they don't wander over, you're participating in a system that provides a little incubator for these people to reinforce their own ideas and recruit new people. And even if they stay within the letter of the law on the subreddit stuff, it's basically an organization tool for things that you don't want to happen. Like, so fine, maybe they email each other privately about inciting violence. Maybe they email each other privately about doxing people, about harassing them, about doing all the things. As long as you don't do it on Reddit, it's fine. Like, what do you think these communities are about? Like, they're just hateful, right? And if you are on Reddit, some people doesn't bother. Like, I stick to the cat picture Reddit subreddit and I'm fine, and I don't associate with them at all. I don't think the cat picture Reddit people are tainted by the other people, but they are participating in a system that allows for that. Whereas if you're on Twitter, you are participating in a system that would like not to allow for that, but does because they're incompetent about enforcing it. So I think that is a fine line. They're like, it's not clear cut. It is definitely not clear cut. But I like where Twitter says it's trying to go, and so far, where Reddit says it's trying to go doesn't match up with what I prefer.
Yeah, it just seems like they pride themselves in these decisions that, like you, I find kind of distasteful. And it doesn't take a very big logical leap to realize that, just like you said, saying Enterprise is the best Star Trek is a very, very, very different thing than saying that, all black people should be slaves. It's just
one is not an ideology. That's why I've hit the flat tax. Like the 90% flat tax, it's more of an ideology, or like Marxism or communism or something really unpopular, but it's an ideology, right? I think that type of ideology, like there are certain ideologies that we collectively all agree as a society are so distasteful that you wouldn't want them to be. You don't want them to be part of your community, right? Like people talking about that, groups discussing it, like, again, because your community is a private website. It's obviously, we're not the United States government. People should be allowed to protest, say what they want, print what they want, do whatever you want. We're talking about what kind of community does Reddit want to create on their private website? And the kind they want to create allows for things that I don't like. And the Enterprise example, so that's why I'm trying to come up with something that is like non-controversial, but is also an ideology that is super unpopular, but I think perfectly okay to discuss in a constructive way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, anything else on Reddit? Marco, you've been quiet for a while. Any thoughts?
I just don't care, honestly. There's a limited number of things I can care about, and the drama of what seems like a really fragmented and sometimes good, but sometimes extremely problematic community that I'm not in. I can't make myself care. I just can't.
Yeah, it's not really the specifics of Reddit that I care about so much, because again, I'm not that regular of a user, and I don't think it's like a linchpin of the internet that if something bad happens to it, it diminishes, that'll be the end of the world.
Oh, that's not what Redditors think, though.
Well, I think it'll be fine. But anyway, it is. I think it's just a good example of how, if you read like these guidelines, they all seem to make sense. Like you read them and you feel they're egalitarian, they are high-minded or whatever. But as a incredibly insightful podcast once said, it's ramifications. Harboring unpopular ideologies is not a reason for banning. That sounds awesome, right? What are the ramifications of that? What does that lead to? What do these series of guidelines lead to? Mocking and calling people stupid is not harassment. What kind of community do you build with this set of guidelines? The shape of that community is not appealing to me, and I'm making, I'm going to get called on this, and I think it's true. I'm making the extrapolation that because this is not appealing to me, and because I think I kind of understand what is generally accepted to be sort of like okay within polite society, certain things that fit within the letter of these guidelines are things that most people will find distasteful and would not want to be associated with, right? Our Coontown, people do not want to be associated with that in general. Advertisers certainly don't, right? And just general people, if it gets too close to them or they realize what's going on back there, definitely is not something they want to deal with, right? And I think there is a standard for that. It's hard to define. That's why it's hard to write down in rules. And if you write down the rules for it, it's like, oh, slippery slope, now you're going to ban everything, right? But it's something that every community of real people, virtual communities, everything, I think deals with much more naturally and calmly. Like, I can't think of another group of people that, like if you had a bowling league and people came in the bowling league and were mocking people and calling them stupid, and you're like, well, that's not against the, that's fine. Like people would say, you're jerks, I don't want to bowl with you anymore, right? That's the way, and that somehow online it's like, well, they must be allowed to do that because we need to allow them to put their hateful words into our database. Otherwise, we're monsters.
Yeah. Free speech doesn't mean what you think it means.
Our second sponsor this week is Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website, portfolio, or online store. For a free trial and 10% off, visit squarespace.com and enter offer code ATP at checkout. Squarespace is simple and powerful with very intuitive and easy-to-use tools. You can create sites with beautiful designs that look professionally designed regardless of your skill level with no coding required. But if you want to jump in and inject your own code, you can do that too. All of these designs are responsive, so your website's scale to look great on any device. And every website plan includes a free online store with commerce functionality if you want to use it. Squarespace offers 24/7 support via live chat and email, and all of this is powered by state-of-the-art technology to ensure security and stability. No matter who links to you, no matter what happens, you're not going to get hacked, you're not going to go down, you're just going to be fine. Everything is state-of-the-art at Squarespace. It is trusted by millions of people and some of the most respected brands in the world. All of this starts at just $8 a month. And if you sign up for a whole year up front, you get a free domain name. Now, many of us listening to this show are programmers or are able to build websites in other ways with other tools. We've all probably done it. Many of us have probably done it. Many of us have either used or written other CMSs or used other services. I can tell you I have used so many things. I have written so many things. Squarespace is so much easier and more fully featured than anything I could ever write. And even if you want to still write your own site, like, I do that a lot because I'm that kind of nerd, there are still so many opportunities to use something like Squarespace that you might come across. If you're making a site for a side project, you don't need to write your own CMS to make a side project site. You can just use Squarespace. If you're recommending something to a friend or a loved one or your employer or a group you're working with, you can recommend Squarespace. That's what I did with my kids' preschool and with a couple of friends. It's great. So there's always, even for people like us who can totally design our own CMSs, there's lots of situations where we shouldn't or can't do it for everything. Squarespace fills all those rules. It is so easy. It is so full-featured. You get so much for free. Check it out. Start your free trial today. This is a real free trial. No credit card required. Just start building a site. If you have an idea for a site or if you just want to fool around, start building a free trial site right now at squarespace.com. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace, build it beautiful.
So one of the things that's been announced for El Capitan is this Rootless mode thing. And I have not had a chance to look into this at all, but I'm very fascinated by what it means to me. And I say that because my day-to-day life is, I live in VMware Fusion. And I am running Windows in VMware Fusion in order to do my day job. And it may be, and we'll find out shortly, that this will not affect VMware Fusion at all. Or it may be that VMware Fusion will have to, or VMware will have to go to extraordinary lengths in order to get themselves back to where they are today. So, John, tell me about Rootless mode and what does that mean?
The framing for this is I just want a brief review of the basic Unix security that OS X has. Unlike classic Mac OS, which these days no one listening to the show probably remembers, there are user accounts on OS X. You log into one, maybe get logged into one by default. Your user account, when you create files from a user account, you're the user that owns them. You can only mess with, for the most part, the files that you own or that have permissions for anyone in your group or anyone at all to modify. And in practice, what that means is the operating system itself and other users' crap does not have permissions set on it that allow you to do anything to it. So the files that make up the operating system are owned by a different user. They're in a different group, and you as your regular user can't mess with them. You can have an administrative user which is in some elevated privilege groups, including something that lets them become the super user. Like when something asks you to enter an admin user password, that's elevating your privileges to, okay, now even though you logged into whatever your account is, now you have super user privileges. You can modify anything on the system. And usually you're doing that on behalf of a program that wants to mess with files that otherwise you as a user wouldn't be able to mess with. And this was seen by Mac users as a little bit of an annoyance, but also as a big win of like, oh, finally, I'll only be able to mess with my files by default. So you can also make non-admin accounts that can't elevate their privileges. You'd have to enter some other administrative account password to elevate privileges. So those people maybe couldn't install applications or mess with the operating system or whatever. The downside of this, as people have always discussed, and which Rootless does not really address that much, but it's worth keeping in mind, is that, all right, so say you have a non-admin account, which a lot of people recommend. You should have a non-admin account because that way you can't elevate your privileges to the level where you can modify anything. And all you'll ever be able to modify is your own files. You can't delete the operating system. You can't mess with anything like that. So if somehow malware got onto your system or hijacked your web browser or whatever, and it was running as you, the lowly user, it would only be able to modify files owned by you. Well, guess what? If they delete everything in your home directory owned by you, you're going to be super sad because that's all your crap. That's all the stuff that you care about. In the end, you don't really care about the operating system, or so this counter to the Unix security model goes. You can reinstall the operating system, but you own all of the pictures that are, in your iPhoto library, all the music that's in your iTunes thing, all the documents, all your reports, all your homework things, all your work files, all your source code. That's all owned by you. All the files you care about are owned by you for the most part. So what is this little model where I have a regular user and then the root user is elevated privileges? And it doesn't really help me. Like if some piece of code runs loose on my system, it can delete all my stuff anyway. That is the sort of counter to, the Unix security model. It sounds so great, but really doesn't help me because it still can delete all my stuff. That is all true, but that's not what malware wants to do most of the time. Malware, kind of like viruses that kill their host really fast, like literal, biological viruses. Malware that wants to either be useful or to spread can't kill its host immediately. Malware that immediately deletes someone's hard drive is not going to get very far because it's not going to have a chance to propagate, because it's going to immediately nuke the person's computer and, not delete their hard drive, delete all their files. Like that'll be really obvious that all their crap is gone. They're going to be super mad and it won't spread. What malware wants to do, both for the spreading purposes and like, why does it want to spread? It wants to spread because it wants to become a powerful thing. What you want malware to do is to silently infect someone's computer, to make it a slave of your botnet, to let it mine for bitcoins, to launch distributed denial of service attacks, to do keystroke logging, to steal pictures, to turn on the webcam and record people. Like what most malware wants to do is be hidden. It doesn't want to delete all your files because that would be really obvious and you would notice and you would immediately know something is messed up. It wants to get its hooks into your system in an invisible way. And that's where the standard Unix protection comes from, where if it wants to really get its hooks into your system, what it really wants to do is modify files that are part of the operating system so it can like log all the keystrokes of every user logged in or control the hardware in ways that an individual user couldn't. It wants to sort of infect the binaries that you run, a lot of which are applications installed in the application folder that maybe you don't own because they were installed by a different user or a domain user, or infect the operating system itself or get into the IO level. Or, that's what malware wants to do. And so having a separate set of permissions where your plain old user account can't modify system files, can't install kernel extensions that intercept all your keystrokes or whatever, that's a good thing, right? So that's the content. That's the current situation. We haven't discussed anything about El Capitan yet, right? What El Capitan's system integrity protection or rootless mode or whatever is trying to do is add another layer of protection, which is instead of just having your regular user that can elevate, the privileges up to the root user that can do anything, and having the root user account that can do anything, they want to say, okay, you got a regular user account. Some of those regular user accounts are admin users who can elevate their privileges to root level, but even root can't do everything. So even if you elevate your permissions by entering an admin password or you become the root user or whatever, even that user still can't do some stuff. And the some stuff that they can't do is modify system files. inject their code into other running processes and all sorts of other things that you would take for granted on a regular Unix system. But once you elevate your privilege to super user level, you can do anything. That's the whole point of the super user. They are, ID 0. They can do anything they want. Doesn't matter who owns it. Doesn't matter. They can do everything. This is limiting the power of the root user. And it's doing that because history has shown that it's not too difficult to take an admin user account and either trick them into entering their admin password or find an exploit that elevates their privileges up to admin level. And that's where the malware can really get its hooks deep into your system. And this is saying, even if the malware gets that far, even if the malware tricks a user into entering their admin password and they are an admin user, or finds a bug that elevates their privileges, we still don't want them to be able to mess with the operating system. Not because the operating system is super important, like that's where their stuff is, but because that's what malware wants to do to really take over the computer, to really install that keylogger that gets every single keystroke that every user ever types on this computer and, emails it to everybody and takes pictures of them and records their credit card number and does all sorts of other nasty things. That's what these things want to do. This is the feature as described. And the details, if you want to see the details of this is in WWDC session 706, innocuously named Security and Your Apps, which is probably the reason I didn't even favorite it when I was at WWDC. Because it's like, what are they going to talk about there? That's boring. But by the time I heard what it was in, it was too late. But anyway, videos are freely available. We'll put the link in the show notes so you can take a look at it. Go through all the different things it's going to do. I'm heartened to learn that the directories they're limiting to the system only is /system, /bin, /user, /sbin, all the things you would expect them to forbid messing with. Where are you supposed to put your stuff, your Unixy stuff? User local, like they've been saying for years and years. Put your stuff in user local. User local belongs to the user. Apple will not blow it away on system installs. I've been using it for a long, long time now. I've never had it go wrong. User local is your friend. That's where you should put your Unixy stuff. And of course in your home directory and all sorts of stuff like that. The limitations that they're adding here, all sound good for the purposes of increasing security, but there are, once again, ramifications of them that are worth considering. Can't modify system binaries, that's fine. You shouldn't be able to do that anyway. Can't install things in the system locations, that's fine. Kernel extensions have to be signed, well, they had to be signed already, so that's not a new, thing. There may be some badly behaved software out there that does currently try to shove stuff into bin, user, sbin, or something like that. Maybe VMware does, but it's pretty easy for them to fix that by just putting their stuff in user local. So that's why I think VMware will probably be okay. Kernel extensions, VMware, I think, has kernel extensions. I don't know, Casey. Maybe you...
I've never paid close enough attention, but I would presume so.
But if they do, you can still have kernel extensions. Kernel extensions is still a thing. They have to be signed. And I think there's probably some, approval process or something involved. But official ATV tipster saying VMware doesn't have kernel extensions. But anyway, you can still have kernel extensions. They just have to be signed. Now he says it does, and they're signed. Anyway, I think they're behind. Anyway, that's not a big deal either. It's just probably installers that put stuff in /bin just because their shirt's in everybody's path, and they really should put it in user local bin, and then modify people's path or do whatever they have to do. Can't attach to running processes and inject code. Can't use dtrace probes on these projected processes. All sorts of stuff like that. This is a thing that you can disable. Obviously, you can't disable it by becoming root, so you're not going to do sudo some command and then turn this off, because the whole point is root's power is limited. If you want to disable it, you have to boot into the recovery OS and disable it from there, the little recovery partition they put in there. The configuration changes are stored in NVRAM. And if you turn off this mode, if you say, I don't want this rootless protection anymore, that setting will persist across OS installs. So if you install a new OS, it won't suddenly turn back on or whatever. So they're trying to be friendly about this. Although the slides say this system of how do I actually enable this if I don't want it is subject to change. Probably, but this is again just, I doubt most people will bother messing with it. It's kind of like when trim support was only available if you turned off the kernel extension signing verification. Nobody wanted to do that and it was scary. I don't think anyone will want to turn this off. But there are ramifications for this type of decision. And the one that came to my mind immediately after hearing all sorts of Mac developers talk about this, and all developers complaining for years about the things that the Mac App Store doesn't allow to exist, like the kinds of apps that aren't allowed in the Mac App Store, are very often the most interesting apps to me. And the one I thought of immediately is Dropbox, a fairly popular application that got its start, the Mac version of it, got its start by making that magical folder that syncs. But one of the key features, I think, of Dropbox, when it was introduced and to this day, is that when you install Dropbox on OS X, and you have your little Dropbox folder, and you drag things into it, it badges your little icon with like a little blue spinny thing. And when it's completely synced, you get a little green checkmark badge. And those little badges, it's like, oh, it's just a magical folder, but also there's this little extra bit of UI that tells me when something has finished syncing, right? There weren't many features for Dropbox. It made a folder with an icon. It did a bunch of magic stuff behind the scenes. And those little icons were basically the whole UI, and also adding a context menu that pops up. But those little icon badges, how the hell did they add little icon badges to the Finder? They didn't install an alternate version of the Finder. Well, they did. They did in-memory patching of the Finder process. The Finder was a running process as part of the operating system, and they would inject their own code into the running image of the Finder to make it do those little badges. You could not have Dropbox in a world where rootless mode exists. In the old days. Obviously, now you can because Apple made an official API for it because there are no dummies and they know Dropbox is really popular. But what I'm thinking of is the next innovative app like Dropbox. If Dropbox didn't exist, El Capitan came out, became the dominant OS install, and then someone had the idea for Dropbox, it could not exist on OS X because there's no way to do what it did. The path that it followed was do something super nasty that Apple doesn't like, keep fighting Apple for years to be able to in-memory patch their running process, eventually become so popular that Apple is forced to give you an official API, and then have Apple close the door behind you and say, now no one else can do what Dropbox did. And this is the type of thing that I worry about from with all of Apple's policies. Not so much that they're going to stop me as a user from doing what I want, because Apple's pretty good, at least on OS X, for giving you a way to turn all this crap off if you don't want it. But that it is necessarily limiting the types of things creative third-party developers can do. Where is the next Dropbox going? Is the next Dropbox going to even be on the Mac? Is it even going to be able to get off the ground? Is it going to be able to get to the point where it can get to the level of popularity where Apple is forced to put official support for the APIs that it wants into its operating system? Or is Apple just slowly closing the door on interesting application ideas, which have never been available on iOS because you've always been limited to what you can do there. But the Mac has been the remaining area where people can try crazy sorts of things. And even if Apple doesn't have an official API for them, if something works and it becomes popular and people want it, that's sort of the signal to Apple, hey, people really like using their Macs to do this, and this company has been doing it in super dangerous ways for years. Maybe you can give them a nice API for that. This rootless thing is nope, you're never even going to be able to do it a dangerous way, because no one's going to be able to tell everybody. Dropbox could not have gotten off the ground if they had to tell everybody, hey, by the way, reboot into recovery partition and turn off this security thing you don't understand, and then install Dropbox. It's great. Nobody would do it. It would not become popular. So that is the promise and the worries surrounding rootless mode or system integrity or whatever you want to call it in El Capitan.
Do you think some degree of that might be solved by market forces if necessary? So, for instance, suppose one of the ways that a lot of these that one of the most common categories of this kind of thing that I know of are kind of hacks and plugins to mail.app. Aren't most of those using some kind of thing like this that won't be possible anymore?
They were back in the day. I don't know if they are, if that's the thing that goes on. Does Apple have an official API for mail plugins at this point? I don't remember.
I'm not sure. Anyway, you can look at situations like that where there's some system app and it has some shortcomings, or there's some compelling features that can only be added by these kind of things, right? And so you're saying we're not going to see those at all. I'm saying we will probably still see that. If it's compelling enough, we will still see those things, but we will see them just in other places. So in the example of Dropbox, we just won't see it on Mac. If that kind of thing is not possible, it'll come to Windows first. In reality, these days, mobile really matters so much. I'm not sure if something like that could launch today and end up mattering. But regardless, it would go on other platforms first. In the case of application plugins, like mail plugins, if those become not possible through any kind of rootless protection or anything like that, then we'll just see things like, alternative mail clients coming up with compelling features instead.
Do you think that's an equivalent thing, though? Like, the people who would make the mail plugin, making a full-fledged mail application that includes the feature that you want is a way higher bar than figuring out how to hack some plugin into mail.
Well, look at where the innovation's happening now. It's not in Mail, it's in Gmail. Anyway, maybe that was a bad example, but there are things like that where like there are other ways for great compelling ideas to gain traction and get out, and maybe it's harder, and maybe some of them are closed off. But overall, I see this as really just another technological progression. Like first, in the early days, you could just scribble all over memory. Now we have protected memory, and you can't just do that quite as easily. And a lot of these things are kind of memory invasion hacks like that, but some of them are not quite as bad as that. But like, as technology progresses, we're getting more and more protections and safeties around things like system processes and user security and everything, and most of these protections cut off categories of apps and hacks and add-ons that were previously possible. And so far, you can look back at these progressions, and I don't think anybody's arguing that we should undo any of them or make holes in any of them. Overall, I think we really have made substantial improvements by adding more protection over time. And there are certain things like the political downside of these protections are things like there not being a way to sideload apps on iOS for users, stuff like that, and that's bad.
Well, they improved that too on iOS 9. Like now, a regular person can build and sign their own applications in Xcode and put it on their device without doing any weird stuff, right?
Well, yeah, yes, that's true. It's that's of limited usefulness, maybe because most people are not going to be able to do that, but just skill-wise and time-wise, regardless. These protections over time generally improve computing for people. They generally improve stability and improve security, and usually we look at them all and say, you know what, we're better off now. So most of these rootless protections are common sense. There's only, some of them might be restrictive to applications and innovation and everything, but I think the percentage of those is going to be extremely low, relative to like everything that matters in computing today, where the innovation is happening in computing today. I think it's moving away from places where it's important to be able to inject code in random places or modify system files. I don't think we're seeing a lot of that kind of innovation anymore, and I don't think we will because just the way the world is moving. So even if Apple didn't do this, like how likely is it that the next disruptive startup was going to be a Finder hack? It's honestly not that likely.
How likely was it to begin with? But it was. Like it totally was. Dropbox was essentially a Finder hack and a bunch of Python scripts. And
yeah, but how many years ago was that?
I know, but like I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. As doors close, obviously it's like, oh, we're seeing less of these hacks. Well, no, you're seeing less of these hacks because they're making them less possible. But I agree with you. Like I think I'm not arguing against these protections, but I think if you're going to add these protections, which I think you should do, you have to modify your other policies to match the reality that you are now disallowing. Because previously, intentionally or not, what Apple was relying on is sneaky, clever people will find ways to bypass things and do things that we don't want them to do. We will be angry about it and try to stop them, but despite our best efforts, some of them are going to become wildly popular, and then we will grudgingly add official API support. And whether that is a conscious strategy or just like how things turn out, that is sort of the life cycle of the innovative software application, right, on the Apple platform. And if you change that life cycle by saying, you know what, we want to cut out the early part where they do the nasty thing in the gross way that we don't think they should, because it's dumb. Like, we don't want people hacking. Like, I don't want people, I didn't like the fact that Dropbox did in-memory hacking. I remember finding ways to disable it by removing the little context menu, like injecting things and stuff like that. Like, that's all bad. But if you take that away, you have to come up with a new life cycle. And the new life cycle could be a developer, a bunch of developers have a reasonable request for system API support for badging icons in the Finder. The current Apple there's no mechanism for you to get that API. Like, it's chicken and egg. You can't say, no matter how many developers say, boy, we really wish there was a way we could intercept audio system-wide because we have some great ideas for like Audio Hijack 3 or whatever. Like, even if it's 15 different companies, or even if like Adobe and Microsoft said it, Apple is just like, that doesn't seem important to us. You shouldn't do that anyway. Like there is no alternate life cycle for these innovations. It's they're cutting off one way for these things to come out, and like I don't see them opening up to the point where like we're willing to entertain your suggestions for new APIs, even if it's a lot of work for us to implement, and it will only benefit you as a third party, simply because we want those kind of innovative ideas on our platform, right? Like they need to make an alternate path. Like as I just put a link in the show notes for the umpteenth time to my really old paths in the grass thing which is a thing about Haxies with the Larry Wall quote, which is not really his quote, but he's quoting somebody else about university campus where they don't pave anything and they just let people walk around, and wherever they wore down the grass, that's where you put the paths. System hacks like that are telling you what is it that people want to do. And it's really like you need to come up with a good way to find out, all right, do people really want stupid badges in their icons, or is this just something some random kid at MIT thinks would be cool for people to have? It's not even a product, it's just a feature. Like it doesn't sound like, could, what's his name? Drew, whatever. Could he somehow have convinced Apple to add an official API for badging icons in the Finder? I don't see how there's any way he could possibly do it. Like there needs to be some way for, if you can't do it the hacky way, what is the official way of doing it? What is the official way of making OS X or iOS or any platform that Apple controls a viable place for you to do this new innovative thing that currently there's no well-supported way to do? And like you said, Mark, was like, well, if they can't do it here, they'll do it first on Windows or whatever. Like, I think all computing platforms are moving in this direction. And secondarily, I don't think Apple would be happy with the answer, oh, we'll just let the innovation happen on another platform and then we'll copy it, right? Apple wants the innovation to happen on its platform, but innovation is weird in that you can't predict what it's going to want. So you have to have some way for the people with good ideas to be able to do what they want to do on your system. And that's a harder problem, I think, because back when you just let them hack stuff up, you didn't have to decide. You were like, well, that person did a crazy hack and no one cares. That person did a crazy hack and no one cares. That one did a crazy hack and no one cares. Oh, this person did a crazy hack and the entire world loves Dropbox. Apple can't make that call. How does Apple know the business? Is it going to listen to all those guys and say, I want an API for this, I want an API for that? Like, in some respects, the old one where you let the people hack your system was easier for Apple, but now they're kind of putting themselves on the hook to either box out these creative ideas or find some new way to sort of vet which crazy ideas are worth implementing and which aren't.
Our final sponsor this week is Igloo. Go to igloosoftware.com/ATP. Igloo is an intranet you will actually like. Now, anyone who's worked in a corporate environment, Casey, John, knows how painful intranets can be. Usually work intranets are awful. The content is stale, the interface is ugly, and you can't access it on your phone or do really anything really useful on mobile. Igloo is an intranet you'll actually like because it's designed for the user in the modern world. Igloo gives you the flexibility to get your work done how you want to, where you want to, and on whatever device you want to use. Igloo is truly building a product meant for 2015, not 1997, like so many unfortunate intranets. With Igloo intranets, you can share news, you can organize your files, you can coordinate calendars and manage projects all in one place. Everything can be social, with comments, like buttons, and anyone can add content based on their permissions with drag-and-drop widgets and a WYSIWYG editor. That's what you see is what you get. I pronounce it WYSIWYG. Do you guys? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
All right. And Igloo makes use of responsive web design, so it looks fantastic on all your devices. And they have an amazing advanced document engine. You can preview and annotate documents, all with HTML5. So it works with everything, from a computer all the way down to even a BlackBerry. It works on every device. It's responsive. It's great design. You can customize your design. If one department wants some ugly font and you don't, you can let them have their ugly font, and you can have your department have the nice, pretty font. You can do everything you want with Igloo. It really brings the best together of things like microblogging services and collaborative document annotation, all that stuff. It brings all that together in your private intranet, and it's very enterprise friendly. It fits a lot of requirements for enterprises. It keeps everything private. It's really quite impressive. Check it out. Sign up at igloosoftware.com/ATP for a free trial. In fact, if your group is 10 or fewer people, it's even free forever. So check it out, igloosoftware.com/ATP for a free trial and get started today. Thanks a lot to Igloo for sponsoring our show once again.
Before we leave this topic, real-time follow-up from the ATP tipster. VMware doesn't shove stuff in the system directories. VMware does use kernel extensions, and VMware currently works in El Capitan's seeds 1 through 4.
So life is good for me.
Right, and he mentioned also too, like Rogue Amoeba's various audio hijack products and stuff like that. Those all have signed text, so those will all still work as well. So, like, I mean, I think,
but they're not available in the Mac App Store, right?
No, definitely. Well, that doesn't mean anything these days.
Right, but couldn't be available. Not just because of their choice to put it there, but they could not put my understanding is that you could not put audio hijacked on the Mac App Store. It violates the guidelines of the Mac App Store.
As far as I know, that's true. I mean, like there are certain loopholes. Like some apps they'll have like a basic version on the App Store that can do some functionality, but then to do anything fun, you have to like go to their website and download this optional extra component and all sorts of stuff like that. Like there are different hacks, but for the most part, I think whether something is allowed in the Mac App Store is almost completely irrelevant to the possible innovation that can happen on the Mac, because the fact is the Mac App Store is just a disaster if in so many ways. I mean, the actual app itself from a user perspective is awful. The policies are draconian and restrictive and oppressive and way worse than iOS relative to what's normal on the platform. It's buggy. It's just awful. There's so many things about it are terrible that we can't say that, well, that if that won't fly in the Mac App Store, then it won't happen on the Mac, because the fact is it's getting to the point now where the App Store is really a ghost town, and almost everything good on the Mac is outside of it.
But like the Mac App Store, as bad as it is, and people might be leaving it, I think it does express what Apple wishes Mac apps would be like the fact that sandboxing was there first and was a requirement, and they don't want you to do any sort of hacks, and they don't want you to install stuff. Like, Apple wishes all apps were as nice and neat and self-contained as the Mac App Store guidelines dictate.
Yeah, but the Mac App Store, it's like XHTML.
You really hate XHTML, don't you? You keep pulling that one out.
Really? When else? Well, no. It was a great example of like the cat was already out of the bag. Everybody was already doing things this whole other way, and the standards group would say, "All right, we're going to lock everything down and be very restrictive and formal. Here's the new way to do it." And everyone basically just said, "No."
XHTML had a transitional DTD. Like, it wasn't that hard and fast. But I think the Mac App Store is more like it's all going to be S expressions. Like, forget about all those attributes and tags. Like, it's just so limited. But the limitations of the Mac App Store, like, I really feel like they express what Apple wishes Mac software development was like. They don't match the reality of what Mac app software development actually is like, and I don't think they also are enough of an overlap with what users actually want. I think applications like Audio Hijack fill a need for people who want that type of application. Like, this is great. It makes me happy that I have my Mac, because this Mac can do this amazing thing with this application that like lets me use my Mac to do interesting things. But that can't fit within the guidelines of the Mac App Store. So, history has shown so far that Apple has been really good about like, well, we'll have this Mac App Store where we show you what we want to be, but we're not going to stop you from loading crap. Like, we'll do everything they can with like developer IDs and the what is it called, gatekeeper thing, and they even have like the gatekeeper setting toggle back from the insecure one to the secure one. If you like turn on the insecure mode for a second and you forget about it and you don't launch an app that wouldn't be allowed, like, it toggles back. Like, they're trying to do everything they can while allowing power users to do what they want, but still they just want everything to be kind of herded over there. And eventually they're just going to come up against these hard things of like, what if, they should go through the exercise and say, what if you really did want everything to be in the Mac App Store, but now you couldn't have Photoshop anymore? How would you square that circle? What would you do to deal with it? You'd obviously have to do something, because you're not going to say like, well, tough luck, Adobe's got to rewrite their application so it fits in the Mac App Store. Like, they would figure out, hey, Adobe, what do you need to get, like, and they just don't seem to extend that sort of effort to these smaller applications. And so we're left in the situation where most Mac software that people really like and care about is either not in the Mac App Store or not in the Mac App Store only, and more software that people do care about is leaving the Mac App Store because it's too much of a hassle to be there. And I don't think this is bad software. Like, Panic's applications, talk about the poster child for like doing things the Apple way. They're practically a miniature Apple. Even they can't stick it out in some cases for the Mac App Store for their applications because it's just too darn much of a hassle. Did they leave the App Store, or did they just get rid of the iCloud thing? I forget. I think they just did their own sync service because they couldn't handle the iCloud thing. Maybe they did leave for one of them. I don't remember.
I think anyway, the fact is, like, the Mac App Store has been I think a colossal failure. I mean, not on a level of Ping, but but honestly not that far off in just like how much people are using it these days, how relevant it is, how much it is really not at all the future of app deployment and sales on the Mac. I mean, it's not as bad as Ping, but I don't feel like it's that far off. It really is terrible. It really has been a huge failure, and it seems like there are lots of forces within Apple, and some of it just like inertia, some of it might be politics. I don't know the internals, but it just seems like whatever forces got it to that state where it's in now, where Apple just tried to rule with such an iron fist, especially with sandboxing coming in after the fact, which really hurt things. Just ruling with such an iron fist there that everyone really just left. And like now, as a consumer, we've tipped the point where like I used to, when it first came out, I used to buy as many things there as I could, because then I wouldn't have to deal with serial numbers or anything. I knew I could install it like on my laptop and my desktop, and it wouldn't give me crap. But what has happened since then is enough big apps have left it that now I'm afraid to buy anything there. Now, if something's available in or out of the App Store, I'll buy it out of the App Store by default now. So, like, I feel like I bet that's happened to a lot of people. Like, as soon as that happens to you once, where like an app you bought in the App Store then leaves the App Store, I think as soon as that happens to you once, you're very likely to switch in that way, the way I did.
Yeah, there's still a barrier, though, to buying outside the App Store for normals, right? For regular people. Like, there's a reason everyone loves the iOS App Store. Like, you just click, oh, you got a thing. Like, especially because so many people have iTunes accounts and the credit card is already there. Like, the benefits are there for regular people. It's a luxury that we have to be like, I know what to do when I get burned in this way. Because I think regular people do get burned. And by the way, CMF in the chat room pointed out that Coda 2 is the one I was thinking of, is out of the Mac App Store. What about all those people who bought Coda on the Mac App Store and now it's out of it? Like, they have the frustration. They're in the situation, but are all of them ready to know which website to go to and know how to buy it online and deal with the serial numbers and do it? Like, we're okay with that because that's the way it was for the longest time. But for people who are sort of came into computers in the iOS App Store age, they're used to just going someplace and clicking a thing and getting the application and just having it there. Like, those benefits are still there. And you mentioned like them ruling with an iron fist in the Mac App Store. I think the problem is that it wasn't that they're ruling with iron fist. They have the carrot and the stick, right? And the stick was sort of floppy and non-existent because, bottom line, you didn't have to buy through the Mac App Store. You can get your stuff. So the stick is barely there. Like, they don't really have much of a stick to make people be in the Mac App Store, as evidenced by all the people leaving it, right? And the carrot was kind of a rotten, crappy carrot too. So there was no real stick to force people to be there, and no real carrot for you, like, this is why you should be in it. In the beginning, it seemed like there was a carrot. Hey, people are excited by the Mac App Store. I got to be there to get the sales. But as it kind of fizzled, the carrot is looking less appealing, and like there basically is no stick. Like, even for regular people, if anyone has a Mac and knows how to buy software for it at all, like, you can Google and find something and something. Like, it's difficult, but it's no more difficult than it was before the App Store. It's exactly as difficult. And before the Mac App Store existed, people made money selling software for the Mac somehow. It wasn't a mass market like iOS. It wasn't something that everybody did. The number of people who owned Macs and who bought software for it was much smaller than the number of people who had iOS devices and install apps. Everyone who's got an iOS device is just tapping around that App Store installing something, right? Even if it's just a Facebook app, right? But it was still a viable business. So it seems like we're slowly reverting to that, where the Mac App Store is filled with the few apps that can still fit within its guidelines. And again, like Coda and Panic. When Panic can't get their app on your thing, like, they're like the most conscientious, like, made in Apple's image, all the similar, like, quality and wanting to do the right thing, and they struggled with a really long time with sandboxing with their application, trying to make a go of it, working with Apple for like a year, 2 years. Like, if they can't make a go of it, like, that's like, what hope is there for anybody else? Because Coda is not like an application that's injecting code into the Finder to put badges on icons. Like, it's an IDE for web development, for crying out loud. And you can't have that. Is that outside the realm of things you can have on the Mac now?
Well, Xcode's in the Mac App Store. Not that counts because it's Apple's.
Yeah, that's the best thing. Like, Apple can put stuff in the Mac App Store, does whatever the hell it wants, because the rules don't apply to Apple.
Which is part of the problem. I mean, that's part of the problem with both app stores, but especially the Mac one, is that they don't dog food most of these things. So it's really, it's a disaster. Well, and even as a user, so not only am I now disincentivized from buying things there that are available elsewhere, but in recent times I don't even look there anymore because so many great apps are not available there, and it only takes a couple of times you're looking for an app before you kind of develop that pattern of, I now have to look in the App Store and out of the App Store. Like on iOS, it's great. You can just look in one place and you can see this is everything available for this platform. For the Mac, it was never that way, but at least when it started, you could tell like it's going this way, and there was more stuff there. It seemed like now it's like if I want an app to do X, I have to search in the Mac App Store, and then I also have to do a web search, and I also have to find. It's like
it's like the bad old days when you just like you didn't have one place to look. Like this again, this is something that should be an advantage for the Mac App Store, and it's just not enough. It's just not enough of a carrot. Like that's why people were in the beginning. Well, I'll be findable. People don't even know that a website exists. Like people don't know where to even start to get Mac App Store to get Mac software, but hey, here's a place to start. It's right at the top of the Apple menu. Let me just go there. And like I fear what's happening now is people go to that item at the top of the Apple menu and they think that's all there is for the platform. Like that's a natural thing to think if you are someone who like came to the Mac from iOS or whatever. Oh, I guess these are all the things I can get for the Mac. Maybe someone might have heard of Photoshop and go, where's Photoshop? Isn't that it? I've heard of that. Isn't that not that? I guess the casual people wouldn't buy Photoshop because it's an expensive application, but or I guess Microsoft Office too. Is that in the Mac App Store? I forget.
I think it might be actually.
Yeah, but anyway, like some things are still outside of it, and there are applications that like Apple applications that don't have to abide by the rules. But like that would be the worst thing. Like if you get a Mac and think that the stuff on the Mac App Store is the extent of what you can do with a Mac, like you're just missing out on too much stuff. Is Dropbox in the Mac App Store? Maybe it is now that they have the icon badging thing. But certainly in the old days, that Dropbox couldn't be on the Mac App Store because it injected code into the Finder. Not going to be on the Mac App Store. If you thought that you got a Mac and you couldn't get Dropbox, like I went to the Mac App Store and I couldn't find Dropbox. Is that not a thing on the Mac? Like, because I've heard my friends talk about it and they said I should get it, but I don't see it anywhere.
Right, and like first of all, little aside here, Dropbox for me has never worked worse than it does on Yosemite. It has because when they added that integration, the Finder integration with the extension point, so they don't have to inject code, it's buggy as hell. It's so buggy. I tweeted about this, and a bunch of people said they see the same thing. I constantly have issues where a file will be updated, remotely from somewhere else. Often it's like our shared folder when you guys upload your audio. A file will be updated, and in Finder Windows, it will lose its badge. And it will be the old file name, not the new one. So basically a ghost file name will appear to be there. And if you go into Terminal and you ls it, it shows the correct contents. But in the Finder window, it's showing stale contents. And it will still show an old file, and a new file won't show up until you relaunch Finder, in which case it'll be fixed for 20 minutes, maybe. So many people have reported that they have the same problem. Old Dropbox never had that problem. Like, this is yet another thing. It's like high ground. Anyway.
Haxies, man. Haxies, like that's the thing about the whole like injecting memory into another process.
Yeah, I know. Right?
The applications that become popular that do that necessarily have to be the ones written by people who really know the ins and outs. Not that again I'm recommending this, that it's a crazy practice or whatever. But how are Haxies a thing for so long? Unsanity, this company making these products that just like did terrible things to your system. How did that work at all? How did they ever become popular? It's because the people who made them were able to find ways to do them that would actually work for a large number of people, which is incredibly hard. It is not a scalable way to do development, but it kind of weeds out all the people who wanted to find hacky ways to do stuff who didn't know every little intricate detail because they would just crash your system and you would never use them. Right. And so the people who did Dropbox, I think there was a presentation on this, went to heroic efforts to figure out how to safely patch the Finder, which is a terrible way to do this, and an official API is better, but it was entirely in their hands to figure out how to do this. Whereas now you're cooperating with Apple and Apple's Finder team on, we'll make this API and you can use it. And you know what it's like with Apple APIs. The first release that it's out in, there are bugs. It doesn't work right or whatever. You're hoping the next year they will fix the bugs and in El Capitan, this new API will work better or whatever. But maybe not. Maybe it's not a big priority for them. So I don't know what kind of hope there is for this getting less buggy for you. I haven't had as many problems as you described for it, but I have seen situations where like what I get usually is like that the badges don't appear. I'm like, doesn't this have integration? Isn't it supposed to be official API? Why do I see? Where do I see no badges? Like, is it even working? And then like the context menu is the same thing. Like, yeah. I think there was official API for that before. Anyway, real-time follow from the chat room. Dropbox is not in the Mac App Store. I did a search for Dropbox in the Mac App Store. I get a screen full of results that say things like app drive for Dropbox, app for Dropbox, app for Dropbox menu, drop for Dropbox, drag share for Dropbox, app for Dropbox, instant app for Dropbox, instant app for Dropbox, plus Swift drop for Dropbox. Anyway, search in the App Store and Apple's decision to let everything in but draw no distinction. Like, I don't even know what these things are, but I fear for someone saying they want Dropbox. And these have prices, $2.99, $2.99, $4.99. I don't think there's any free. Oh, there's a couple free ones here and there. Droplight for Dropbox, DVR webcam Dropbox, revisions for Dropbox. I fear for someone thinking the Mac App Store is where you get applications. I've heard of this thing called Dropbox. Let me go find it. Faced with this screen, I don't know what they would do. But they certainly wouldn't get Dropbox, I can tell you that, because it's not here.
Right. Well, and that's exactly the thing. It only takes a couple of times of searching for something that you know is out there and not finding it in the Mac App Store before you just stop looking in the Mac App Store.
Or you download half of these, because they all have Dropbox icon. Like, they all have a little box that is either an exact copy of the Dropbox icon or someone trying to redraw the Dropbox. Like, oh, it's so bad.
Yeah, App Store search is a whole other can of worms.
So things are going really well in the Mac App Store then.
Oh my god! Yeah, we should mention Craig Hockenberry's recent post too on this.
Yeah, I was going to say just so we can put it in the show notes. Someone mention it.
Yeah, we'll definitely read this because it's like, because one of the problems with the Mac App Store and Mac development in general is not only that there's all these policy issues and ruling with the iron fist and their floppy carrot and lack of stick, but also it's like they're ruling with a neglectful iron fist. Like, they don't even care, and so much stuff, so many luxuries that iOS developers get, or new features that iOS developers get from things like iTunes Connect, iCloud, APIs. So many of them don't come to the Mac at all, or come very late to the Mac. And like Craig cites examples of like test flight builds and stuff like that, where it's just like this stuff is like, and usually it's promised for Mac. It's like, oh, Mac will have it soon, and just hardly ever gets there. It gets there very late or whatever. And yeah, it obviously. The Mac API-wise, development-wise, and Mac services for developers, obviously these things are not incredibly high priorities at Apple. Because if they were, regardless of what Apple says, and regardless of what we hear from like, hardworking people inside the company who are in the middle of the hierarchy somewhere, regardless of that, we can just tell by their actions. You can tell by their results that this is not the priority. iOS is the priority. iOS has way more users, brings in way more money, is way more high profile. Obviously, that's the higher priority. And I can't really fault them for that, but it's unfortunate as Mac users, and it's even more unfortunate if you're a Mac developer, that you're really on what used to be the thing Apple cared so much about, and now is clearly, third or fourth priority these days.
The one that hurts the most is where they did the thing where they disabled app reviews from beta versions of iOS. And they didn't do it on the Mac. Like, that's not a hard... I don't want to say, that's so easy to do. But look, they dedicated the resources to do it on iOS. That feels like the type of thing just to save face. You would like, can we do that for the Mac users too? Is it that big a deal? Maybe they will do it eventually. Maybe it takes longer to patch the Mac App Store application. Maybe there's no one working on the Mac App Store application. I don't know what the details are, but that one really hurts. Because, like, everyone's so excited. Hey, people can't review. Never mind that it's kind of like a little too little, a little too late, because already betas are in people's hands and they were writing reviews. But they fixed it, right? Not for Mac users. Sorry, you don't even get that. You don't even get what you think is probably like the lowest effort type of, nope, just not a priority at all. And like in some respects, like the Craig Hockenberry thing is coming at it from the perspective of a Mac developer. And as people have always said, like Apple cares about Apple first, users second, developers third or later. It's a reasonable prioritization. So it's like a lot of times developers want things from Apple that Apple doesn't give them because they think it's more important for users to have something or for Apple to have something. But this is a case of developer versus developer. It's comparing what is it like if you're developing for Apple's most popular platform or developing for Apple's second most popular platform. And it's a hell of a drop-off going to the second most popular. And we'll see what happens if suddenly the watch becomes the second most popular one. Then you're developing for the third most popular. Not good.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure that'll happen, but that's another show.
And either way, remember, just a couple years ago, we came back to the Mac, so things are fine. Don't worry about it.
I mean, I think they are doing better with API parity, because so many APIs appear in both, like extensions API that did come out at the same time in both, which is kind of, when that happens, it's like a boost to the Mac, because like, oh, I wouldn't expect that. I would expect it to be iOS first and Mac second. When it comes out simultaneously, you're like, wow, the Mac really got a boost there. But that's a user-facing feature. It's not a developer-facing feature. And so, yeah, there is a priority cascade, and it does still affect things. But
yeah, and I would not hold out any hope for improvements to the Mac App Store. I mean, like the beta thing you said, like, like not allowing people to review from betas. just look at the state of the Mac App Store application itself. Just try to use it for anything. Try to do anything in it. Try to browse anything. Obviously, doing anything to this app it must be extraordinarily difficult and impossible inside Apple to get anything done inside this app because it doesn't happen.
I just think there's a lot of people working on it, though. I think like the underlying frameworks probably have people working on them, like the things that, again, was tell you like you can run updates from the application, then close the application entirely, but the updates still run because there are like processes and daemons behind the scene that manage software updates. Those I think are being worked on because they do the OS updates and they do app updates to them. I think there's people working on those, but sort of the GUI skin that provides like the view into the store and does all that seems like I can't remember the last time a new feature appeared in that. Maybe they have someone fixing the most egregious bugs. It just seems like no one's working on it.
I can honestly say it's worse than iTunes. It has many of the same problems and challenges of iTunes of having this giant web service rendering what's basically a big web view in the app.
Is it a web view or is it like XML like the iTunes store used to be? Remember when the iTunes store was like custom XML?
Yeah, that's a good question. It might be that. It feels like a big web view. It behaves like a big web view.
It could be like what is that thing that they bought for iOS, like Chomp or whatever, like the thing that when they redid the regular app store, like
oh yeah, when they made the search suck even more by having those big cards, they don't let you see one app at a time on screen. That was great.
Yeah. Anyway, we shouldn't be trying to guess what the underlying technologies are. Who cares? We just know the end result is an application that does weird things, and sometimes the only solution is to like close it and relaunch it or to restart your Mac, and that's not good.
Thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week, Igloo, Squarespace, and Need. And we will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I joined a gym.
You joined a gym?
I joined a gym.
What are you going to do with the gym?
It's going to lift heavy things.
I haven't done that yet. I probably won't.
It's going to run in place like a hamster in a wheel.
I haven't done that yet. I have walked really fast in place, though. Does that count?
Like a hamster that's not in a hurry.
Yeah. Like a hamster who's like reading his iPhone.
How does that work with the official Marco wardrobe?
What do you mean? I wear shirts there, and then I wear them home.
Black T-shirt, and he's got. I'm sorry. Do you have shorts as part of the wardrobe?
In the summertime, yes, I do wear shorts because it's just it's way too hot for pants in the summertime, and I don't like. I really hate shorts, honestly. But I own shorts because I live somewhere with summer. That's a season you do have, Casey.
Yep.
So you doing this to fill your circles?
I am. Yeah. I mean, that I would like to generally stay healthy, but yes, essentially it really is just for the circles.
So with all this circle filling in the gym, are you like dropping pounds?
Some, yeah. I'm down. I don't know, like 6 pounds, and for like the 2 months or something. I don't know. I'm down some. It's not a dramatic thing because I'm still eating ice cream, but
it's the Apple Watch versus Blue Apron.
Blue Apron's fine. No, Blue Apron is actually great because it's pretty small portions. It's ever since we started that, it's been actually easier to be healthy and lose weight because it is so. It's a dinner from Blue Apron. Even if you add more oil than they tell you to, because you have to add more oil than they tell you to, because the amount they tell you to is not nearly enough to fry those vegetables. Even if you add more oil than they tell you to, you're still under 1,000 calories for dinner, and that's pretty good. So, anyway, I mean, I joined the gym because I live in an area with a great variety of weather, and a good portion of that weather is not that pleasant to be walking very quickly for 3 miles outside. So I joined earlier this week when it was like 90 degrees one day and 1,000,000,000% humidity, and I joined during that day, and it's like $10 a month for what's basically the worst gym in the world. But I don't care because it's $10 a month, and that means I don't have to buy a treadmill and put it in the house anywhere.
Are you scoping out the gym people? You doing some people watching, seeing the varieties of people that show up at the gym?
In my 2 visits to the gym so far, I have not seen that many other people, honestly. It's a pretty big gym, and I go at weird times when everyone else is working. So I go when it's almost empty. So I've seen a handful of people, and I just kind of look straight ahead and I watch my iPhone stuff. And
you're watching video on your iPod? Are you reading things? You're listening to podcasts?
I haven't quite figured all this out yet. I've only gone twice. This was this week, and it's been nice other days this week. So I've been walking outside other days this week. But the first time I did podcasts, and it was kind of boring because like I'm fine doing podcasts when I walk outside because like visually I'm amused by the outside world. But when you're just like walking on a treadmill, staring at bad cable TV that you're not listening to, you're listening to podcasts, it's kind of boring. So the last time I went, I watched Nevin's CocoConf talk. That was really good, and I'll link to that in the show notes, I guess. And that was an hour long, so that was perfect. So maybe this might actually be a good time to watch conference talks and do other things that have a visual component.
Need to get you some VR goggles.
I don't know about that. Hey, have either of you guys ever used a treadmill before?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does the thing where you have like vertigo after you get off, does that ever go away?
What?
I can't say that I got that one.
Yeah.
Maybe you're just getting lightheaded because it's only your second day at the gym.
No,
maybe it's because you're looking at the screen and not paying attention to what's going on around you.
Yeah, maybe you're getting motion sick.
Well, yeah, it's like when I'm on it, I'm fine. But then if I stop, and I've tried like slowing it down gradually, but it doesn't really matter. Whenever I stop, I feel like I've gotten off a boat. You're like, whoa, like I feel, I don't feel great for a few minutes afterwards.
You might be getting motion sick.
I mean, it seems like it's a form of motion sickness where it's, I don't know, people in the chat are saying you get used to it.
The times I've been in a treadmill, I haven't been staring at an iPhone in front of me, right?
Exactly.
So I don't know maybe that is a common thing especially if like the difference between like the iPhone in front of you and the TV across the room, I think is a big difference in terms of like where you're focusing.
Well, the problem is it's a TV on your treadmill right in front of you. So, and I've tried looking at the ceiling, looking across the room, like I've tried other things like that, and it doesn't really seem to make that big of a difference. Like where I'm looking at just like I'm running, so my body thinks I'm moving forward, or my brain thinks I'm moving forward, so it's probably compensating for that. And then when I stop walking in place, then it's like it has to like switch back to the uncompensated mode, and I think that's what causes that. But
so if you had VR goggles, as you walked, you could be moving through a forest, a virtual forest, while a virtual screen floats in front of you, so you can watch Nevin's conference talk while walking through a virtual Yosemite.
I could do that, or I could just like use the bikes and ellipticals instead. I don't know.
Or you just walk outside. I'm amazed that you hate humidity so much that you'd rather walk in. Like people usually go to the gym like in the winter when it's freezing outside.
Well, and I knew like I got the Apple Watch in late April when it was really beautiful outside, and it's been pretty beautiful since then. But I've known like, well, winter's going to come eventually, and I want to keep this up in the winter. And winter here is pretty bad, not as bad as you, but pretty bad. And so I wanted to have some kind of option. And I looked into like, should I get a treadmill in my house? And it seems like there's almost no reason for a regular person to do that. There's like the pros and cons.
If you need someplace to hang laundry.
Yeah. Well, it ends up they're huge. Like
I know they're giant.
Turns out.
Oh my God. Like when they're in a gym, you really realize it. But like when you like tape out measurements in your house of how big a treadmill actually is, oh my God, they're massive.
And not just how much room it takes up, but especially for the ones that like if they're like a stair thing or whatever, like how much room you need around them for swinging body parts and getting on and getting off, and then if the thing has moving itself. Yeah, for the winter activity, maybe you have almost the makings. Well, maybe not for you, maybe for Adam. If you could get Hops and the other 2 dogs that your parents have, you could have the makings of a kind of like a dog sled team. You just need to be like maybe they could pull Adam. If you just get 4 of them instead of 3, then it would be even. That would be adorable.
Oh my God,
that's way better than buying a treadmill.
Now that I put that idea into your head, I want to see some pictures of that.
All right, well we'll work it out.
Because there's one thing that breed of dog does well is pull in the same direction, right? You're just going to run in 5 different directions. So, boing.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Anyway, yeah, you can't exercise outside in the winter. People do it. Speaking of rogue amoeba, Paul Kafasis is out there with his bare feet in 20 degree below weather.
That Paul Kafasis is not a fair comparison. He's like a superhuman. It is not fair to hold me up to his standard at all. Not even close.
I cannot believe, like, when you saw the watch announcement, was the first thing that popped in your head, darn it, I'm going to join a gym?
Not even close.
Right. Like, how did we get from A to B here?
Doesn't have the antibodies. He was infected.
You're right. Because even like when we first started seeing good pictures of it, I was concerned seeing the sensor bubble on the bottom, and I was concerned that would be uncomfortable pressing into my skin. So I even have said in the past, like before I got it, I was like, if they just made a model that lacked all the fitness features and lacked that big bubble on the bottom, I'd buy that instead, so it'd be more comfortable. And yeah, now that I have it, no, I would never do that. That's stupid.
I'm depressed at how strong my antibodies are and how little I care about the circles. I really wished I was more like Marco. I would like maybe Marco's got into it. Maybe I haven't done anything like this in a while. Maybe I'll still get back into it. It's just, God, I just can't.
We can start competing with each other. Do you have those antibodies or whatever?
Maybe that would help. Like Apple doesn't really have that integration. You have to use like some third-party app that keeps track of it. That's it. Underscore should add that to Pedometer plus if it's not already there, like a competition. Maybe that actually would help, but I don't know.
Well, one of the problems also is that even in WatchKit 2, a lot of the data for the circles, like I don't think apps have access to all that. Like you have access to the step count for the orange circle, but I don't think you have access to the green or blue.
Yeah, the step count is enough though. You see like Amy Jane and Montero like competing for with their Fitbit step counts. I think that all is in the Fitbit is just step count. How many steps?
Yeah, I think so.
Like that competition that does motivate a lot of people. Maybe that would help. Like I'm not doing terrible with the circles. When it tells me to get up, I do feel a little bit of guilt. Like I should probably get up and go for a walk now or whatever. But the bottom line is I'm not filling them. Like and my whatever value of all my circles are at, it's low. I was filling them all at WWDC. Like I know what it takes to fill them. But my daily schedule just does not do enough to fill them, at least when my watch is on. Because I tend to find when I come home from work, I want to take my watch off just because I just want to get stuff off my body. And then...
Just want to get totally naked. Just
well, like my house doesn't have air conditioning, so I'm certainly changing into shorts. And getting into home mode, and that involves taking the watch off. And so that means anything I do after that, like walking around with the kids or whatever, is going to not count. But I don't care. Whatever.
You do. You care just enough to be annoying to yourself, but not enough to actually do it.
Yeah, to feel like a little twinge of guilt when I don't fill them, but not enough to actually fill them.
Yeah, you're just going to be perpetually mildly annoyed by this.
It doesn't bother me that much.
I tell you what, I am a blue ring stud, but the green and red, not so much.
The green is the hardest one. I think I filled the other ones, but the exercise one, because like I don't quite know what I have never actually initiated like a workout. So all of my green filling is, I guess, incidental from heart rate stuff, and I don't even know how that works. Like whatever, but I'm just never filling it, except for WWDC.
To completely change pace, how's potty training going?
It's going, actually.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's not complete. But it's going.
Is he? I forget if he's going to daycare, but if he is, are they reinforcing it there?
Yeah, so he goes to preschool, and he's going now to summer camp, which is just school in the summertime. We were able to do this transition with their support, and they do it all the time because they have school for 2 and 3 year olds. So like they have seen lots of potty training in their time, and they're experts at it. So they support it, and they do it while he's there. So it's good. We're all good.
Are they doing any positive feedback stuff, like sticker charts or anything like that, like either at home or at school, to try to like reward for compliance, basically?
Sticker. I had not thought of a sticker chart. That's a good one.
That's one of the things that our kids do. They recommend it at home, but like it doesn't work on some kids or whatever. But like you just have a piece of paper, and it's like every time you do it, you get a sticker on the chart, and some kids are motivated by it, and some kids aren't. Oh, I just didn't know if that was one of the things that you were doing.
No, we've just been doing like food motivation, basically like candy and cookies and stuff. We very quickly learned that you can't reward going to the bathroom. You have to reward like time spans in which you have not had no accidents. Because if you reward going to the bathroom, then he just wants to go every 5 minutes. Yeah, so that's no good.
So to go back a step, you've basically outsourced potty training to the summer camp, is what I'm hearing.
Well, he's there for like 2.5 hours a day. I mean, it's not like
giving you a hard time.
Camp is a very, it's technically called camp, That's a very generous word for what it really is. It's just preschool in the summertime, and it's mostly outside. And that's that's basically it. And preschool, as you will learn soon, Casey, is really short every day. Like it goes, that 2.5 hours goes by very quickly.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Yeah, it's been a wild couple of weeks at the Liss household because Declan has gone from sort of kind of able to crawl-ish to pretty adept at crawling. And he used to, up until this point, barrel roll pretty effectively.
That's awesome.
Do a barrel roll. That's a reference, John. Anyway, so he would barrel roll pretty effectively, and then he'd figured out how to crawl, and now our world is upside down because he doesn't just stay still anymore. And that's kind of petrifying. And additionally, he's also starting to pull up onto his feet, which is adorable to watch and wonderful, except that he's also doing that in the crib, which is not as good because then he gets himself all woken up and doesn't want to sleep as long, and we have to lower the crib again and blah, blah, blah. So wild couple of weeks at the Liss household.
My favorite picture of Declan recently was showing him next to your computer with the note that he'd already pulled off a keycap.
Yeah, it's genuinely, it had been like 15 seconds, and he crawled over there, ripped off a key.
It's the great dawning realization that, like, the idea, like, when we have a kid, he won't destroy our crap. Like, the second that kid can move, he's like, I'm going to destroy your crap.
Yep, that's pretty much how it
We
went.
can seek out the most expensive item and say, I can get my little baby fingernails underneath this keycap. Look, it comes off. This is awesome. It's like, I looked away for 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Were you there? That's exactly how it went.
I know how kids work. To your credit, you were not one of the people who who looked down on the other people and said, well, my child won't destroy my stuff. I'll just make sure they don't touch my things. And it's like, there's a reason baby proofing is a word.
Well, so I'm not like that about most things. However, I have been very smug about my car. My car will not get ruined. I will not allow my car to get ruined. If that means no food in the car, screw it, no food in the car.
Is there a car seat installed in your car now?
Yes. Oh, there's been for a while.
So isn't it destroying your seats as we speak?
No, I have a cover.
A cover, yeah.
Yeah, I've had similar good luck. I mean, we also, like, there just by policy, there's no food in the car. Like, just and that's been fine. We also have a policy that you don't kick my seat. And so far, he sometimes forgets and kicks my seat anyway, and we have to yell at him. But so far, overall, it's pretty good.
You know what I did with the seat kicking? It really depends on your kid. I think you could pull off the seat kicking thing. My kids, not really. But the thing I did with them, it lasted a pretty long time. I knew it wouldn't last forever, is that I told them that the seats have airbags in them, which is true. And that airbags contain explosives, which is true. And that if you kick the seats, you could cause them to explode, which is not true, but they don't know that.
Nice. That's amazing.
Actually, I don't think I ever did. I don't think I ever actually told them that they caused. I would say, the seats have airbags in them. Airbags have explosives. I think that's all I would say, and I would say it in an alarmed voice, and they would stop kicking. And it was awesome. That worked for so long until they were like, you know what? These things are never exploding. Kick, kick, kick.
That's so amazing. Good grief.
Adam's a good boy. You won't need to do that with Declan. I don't know. He looks like a scamp. I can't tell, but I think he's in trouble, Casey.
I can't wait to see Casey just go through all this, because like, it's not like I'm any expert on it, but just by being like 2 years ahead of him, basically, that's amazing to me. Like seeing now, Casey, like, now you're going through like the beginning of mobility, which is, as you said, terrifying for the parents.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, what's great about parenting is that every time you think you have the current stage down pat,
oh, yep,
everything then changes with the next stage. It's like, yeah, we finally got him to, eat and sleep. Oh my God, now he's moving.
Yep.
Oh my God, now he can hurt himself on every possible thing. Yeah, and then once you get that down, then he's going to start learning how to open doors and go outside.
And then he'll get some attitude.
Yeah, then he's going to get some attitude. Then then eventually you have everything down, and then delete the diapers. Yeah, it's just, oh my God, like everything is like it's hard, and then you figure it out, and then everything changes.
Yeah, that I've asked a lot of parents, most of whom are roughly my age. What is their secret? What have you learned? What should I know? And the single most consistent answer I've gotten almost every time is, don't get used to anything, because the moment you do, it all changes.
That's good. Yeah.
John, how's your front door?
Do you have a front door yet?
They are ordering a new one.
So you'll have a front door in like 3 more months, maybe?
2 to 3 weeks or whatever. Hopefully, it'll happen between the vacation I'm leaving on now and the vacation I'm leaving on after. There's some time in between there. But anyway, people have been painting.
How's that going?
All right.
That well?
I don't know what I have yet to find someone who does what I think is a good job of painting anything, because it's all about surface prep. Like they just want to get to the point where they can start slapping on the paint. It's like, I want the surface to be smoothed out before you start slapping on the paint. I want you to think about how it's going to look when it's finished painting. If it's not going to look good, like, well, whatever.
What we learned when we've done both renovations, Tiff can paint. She learned, like, she and her parents can paint like the whole room, no time at all. It turns out professional painters are really no better than good, home taught painters. Just, you don't have to do it. That's the big thing. It's like, you're not paying them to do a better job than you could do. You're paying them so that you don't have to do it. That's it.
I continue to believe there must be contractors out there like the ones I see on TV that do a good job, and especially for things like surface prep. Sometimes you can't do what they do because you don't have the tools to. It depends on the surface. Like, if you're painting a room, like, big walls are big and flat, fine. But if you're painting like the trim around a window where you just pulled off storm windows from the 50s, they're a wreck. You have to spend a lot of time on surface prep, pulling off old caked on paint, filling in voids, sanding everything down so it's smooth. And I don't know that I could do a better job of that than a professional, mostly because I don't even have all the tools, all the little, like, just a plain old random orbit sander, but those little tiny sanders to get into the corners, and all the experience filling things, and like, just, that just takes a long time. But like, they don't.
The reality, you could buy the tools at Home Depot for like $30 if you needed to.
If given unlimited time, yes, I could. But I would take the amount of time they took to do all my trim, I wouldn't get one window done. I would do a better job than they do on that one window, but I wouldn't get one window done because I'd be there, like, and instead they're just like, you know what, good enough. You're not going to be able to see it from the street. Paint.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. Like, you're not paying for them to do a better job than you could do. You're paying for them to do it so that you don't have to do it, and they can do it faster.
Anyway, almost done. Front door. I think the front door is going to be the worst part, though, because there's a bunch of carpentry stuff around there, and it's just like, it's been hand waved over, and we just say, like, see how our front door looks now? We want it to look like that, but with a new door. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. I'm like, I keep asking them, so what part are you going to remove, and what are you going to put back? Oh, was it going to look like this? Well, not exactly. Like, what do you mean by not? Oh, it's going to be bad. But anyway, yeah.
If there was ever a time that any human being should periscope anything, it's the conversations that you have with your contractors. Because they've got to be just amazing.
They're very one-sided and involve a lot of nodding and smiling from the other end of the conversation, and then me going, oh, yeah, just...
They hate you so much, don't they?
I don't know. I don't know if they hate me. I don't know.
Do you tip them?
No.
Wait, you're supposed to tip contractors?
That's what I thought.
The amount I'm paying these people, no.
We didn't tip any of our contractors ever. We'd occasionally buy bagels and stuff for the guys that were working, but like, we wouldn't. You're paying a lot for this. It's like, I don't think it's a tipping thing.
Yeah, seriously, this is a tremendous amount of money. They can take their tip out of the tremendous amount of money I'm paying for this project.
Yeah, I don't like. You don't tip like when you buy a car.
I don't think that's really an apples to apples comparison, but
it's about the same amount of money.
I don't. I fully confess that I have no idea when it's appropriate to tip, but I also hate tipping as a concept, and so I'm probably a bad person. The places when I'm supposed to tip, I do, but I literally have no idea when I'm supposed to tip, other than like eating at restaurants. That's it. And staying at hotels. I know you're supposed to do that there, but only because I Googled it.
Wait, what? I never tip in a hotel ever.
The housekeeping tip.
That's how much is that?
When I Googled for it, they were like a couple bucks a day, and that's what I've been sticking to.
What?
Yeah, and then the problem is you need small bills. That's the little envelopes on the desk. That's for housekeeping tips. Like in most hotel rooms, there's a small envelope.
What?
That says some kind of passive aggressive thing on it. And that is for you to put the housekeeping tip in. Because if you just leave cash around, then they might assume that's your cash.
You can leave it. You want to leave it, and even if you don't use the envelope, you just want to leave it with a note, for housekeeping or thank you or something, in a way that they know that you didn't accidentally leave it. Because housekeeping people don't want to take random cash laying around, because then you're gonna be like, hey, housekeeping stole from me. But like when you're checking out, take the wad of cash, a couple bucks a day or whatever, put it somewhere with a note that makes it clear that this is for housekeeping, and then you go.
Yeah, don't think I've ever done that in my entire life.
Yeah, it's a big pain because you either have to have like if, let's say you're doing a few bucks a day or $5 a day, then you either need to have a whole bunch of fives when you get there, or you have to like tip like a 20 at the end. But then like that could be a different person than who worked the last few days. So.
Yeah, I just do it all at the end. I don't do it every day because that's just too much of a hassle. Like in my Googling, what I discovered, it's like that if you do it all in one day, it evens out in the end for the people who work there. Like, you're right, it might not be the same person or whatever, but it's not as if one person has a line on when everybody's checking out and gets all the money. Like, it evens out across the whole staff.
That's good, because it's usually I'll just like put a 20 in there on the last day and then to call it a day. But
this is lunacy to me. I've never heard this before.
See, tipping is crazy. I hate it with a passion. I think they should just raise the prices for everything and pay people living wages and so on and so forth.
Do you tip barbers?
Yes.
I do, yeah.
See, I do too, and so it was actually a dilemma. So my barber, usually I only have 20s because that's what ATMs give out, and whenever I have small bills, when I empty my pockets at night, they collect somewhere on my desk, and I forget to put them back in the next morning.
You should really only have 50s in your wallet. I feel like, Marco, with your M5 and your lifestyle, you should be a type of person who only has 50s, like a grandpa.
So with the barber I've been going to for years. It's these 4 Italian guys. They're amazing. They used to charge $16 for a haircut. So I'd give them 20. They'd keep the extra 4. Perfect. Then they raised the price to $17. Now, like, I don't want to just give them 20 again, because now it's like I'm just...
You give them 21, right?
Right. So now I have to remember to bring a single now every time. So
They'll give you change. If you give them 2 20s, they'll give you change.
I'm not... That's such a hassle. I'm not going to...
$3 on 17. That's a sufficient tip.
But it's like they took a pay cut.
Well, it's not your fault.
It is kind of his fault because he doesn't want to have a single with them. Like, just give him 2 20s. They'll give you change. It's fine.
No, I just bring a single whenever I remember to, because it's so much, like, because I don't want to give them a less tip than before.
Why don't you give them a $20 bill and 1 silver dollar, like a grandpa?
That would be a grandpa.
Do those still exist? Can you still get those?
Someone's got them. They're still in circulation somewhere.
Give them a $2 bill.
All right, let's do titles.
Floppy carrot and lack of stick is amazing.
Wasn't there a better one? I remember seeing a better one somewhere. Blue ring stud. That was my other favorite one.
Oh, that is really good, actually.
That's probably better than floppy carrot. Even though that is not really related to anything, I think it's a good title. And I just want people to listen to the episode waiting for, like, what the hell is blue ring stud? And it's all the way at the end, and it has, like, nothing to do with, like, Reddit or the Mac App Store or anything. So it's saying that Casey knows how to stand up.
Hey, guys.
I know how to stand. Now your son knows how to stand. Where did he learn that from? He got those standing genes from me. I know how to stand.
Yeah.
Declan stands up and says, "You go, just like Dad."
Just like your dad. Oh, goodness.